Welcome back to Breaking Math, folks. Today we're venturing beyond the realm of pure numbers and into the fascinating intersection of math and democracy. I'm your host, Autumn Finef. Joining me is my co-host, Gabriel Hesh, and Ismar Volej, a professor of mathematics at Wellesley College and director of the Institute for Mathematics and Democracy, whose work explores how mathematical tools can be used to strengthen the democratic processes. Ismar recently published a book, Making Democracy Count, which dives deep into this very topic. But before we dive deep into today's episode, you can support us by signing up to our Patreon at patreon.com/breakingmath. We've also launched our new website, breakingmath.io, so we highly advise you to go check that out. We also have updated some of our social media handles and uploaded a lot of videos to YouTube. So if you would like to find us on YouTube or Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it at this point, you can find us at Breaking Math Pod. But if you want to find us on Instagram or TikTok, you can find us at Breaking Math Media. We also have a Facebook community, which is Breaking Math Community. In addition to that, we have an open call for mathematicians, scientists, and engineers. Pretty much anyone who would like to talk about their work. So feel free to email us at breakingmathpodcast@gmail.com or fill out the link in the show notes below. Now, on this episode of Breaking Math, you can join us as we take apart our election system mathematically. But first, here's a message from our sponsors.
Thank you. Those are very kind words. As you know, mathematicians aren't used to this kind of attention, right? Like we write our papers and books and then 3 people read them and or not. But this is like sort of some next level engagement, and it's very gratifying and wonderful, and I love doing it. But yeah, so I come from Bosnia, which as you might know, went through this horrible war in the early 90s, and that's when I came to the U.S. as a refugee. And so I was always aware of how bad the democracy can break down. Like I've seen like the other end of demise of democracy, right? Complete with like genocide and atrocities and war and killing and everything and all that. So I think it's when democracy started really breaking down in this country over the last some number of years, it really it affected me maybe differently than it would have someone else. And to this day, right, I see things that are happening right now in the U.S. and across the world. It's not just U.S. You're sort of the leader in it, but still, it's happening across the world. I can see the potential for how bad it can get. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book. It was my way of contributing to making things a little better in the only way that I knew how. I've always done mathematics and I love mathematics, and I could have gotten engaged politically maybe in some other ways, but this is really the optimization of my knowledge and my expertise to marry these two things, creating a better democracy but based on sound mathematical processes and evidence. So that's how my background as an immigrant here was kind of folded into this book, and everything else that I do in the space of math and democracy.
Nice. I think for those who are listening to this podcast episode in particular, and who may not have read your book, I'd really love to introduce some of the topics. And I think I don't remember if it was your preface or your first chapter. You start with a very, very basic example, and it was extremely, extremely helpful. And the basic example was just simply ranked choice voting. And if I recall correctly, the example you chose was your daughter going to school and what movies they wanted to watch. Again, for the sake of our listeners tuning in, can you go over that example or any other similar examples you've thought of in the meantime, just so that everyone's on the same page with what ranked choice voting is?
Right. So that's an example that every time I talk about this stuff, all my talks either start or end with this example. When my daughter was in 4th grade, the teacher said, Friday we're going to watch a movie. you behaved well or something, right? Come to school in pajamas, bring your favorite toy, and we'll watch a movie. And she said, we'll vote on 3 options. And they were, if I remember correctly, Bold and The Incredibles 2 and Coco, right? So my daughter is 9 years old at this point, right? She's in 8th grade now. And I said to her, that Friday morning, I said, why don't you try to remember how the vote turns out? Just let me know if you can. And she comes back from school, and sure enough, she reports that, and I'm going to get the numbers wrong now, because I don't remember exactly how they went, but I have the book here. Also, I don't know if you're seeing it. It was,
we all got our copy.
Bold got 7 votes. Incredibles 2 got 6 votes, and Coco got 4 votes. Okay, so 7, 6, and 4, right? And the teacher said,
yes,
well, Bold has the most votes, so we're going to watch Bold. The problem with that is, it's really the fundamental issue with all the mathematics underlying democracy, and there's a lot of it underlying democracy, is that this is not really necessarily representative of the will of the majority, right? Because more people, 10, I guess, is that right? Did I say 6 and 4? 10 people did not have Bold as their first preference. So in a sense, the will of the minority has been imposed on everyone, right? Now, maybe these other kids also didn't mind watching Bold, right? Or maybe they really hated Bold and would rather do their laundry and do dishes at home than watch Bold. But we don't know that. The system did not gather enough information for us to be able to tell that. And so what the teacher could have done is she could have done a little runoff election, which in this case, in the case of 3 candidates, 3 options, is equivalent to instant runoff. Basically eliminate the option with the fewer first place votes, which would have been Coco, 4th place votes, and ask those 4 kids, well, we're not going to watch Coco. It doesn't have enough support. But which movie would you like to watch between the remaining 2 options, Bold and Incredibles 2? And those 4 kids, depending on which movie they chose, the result could have turned out differently. Maybe Bold wouldn't have come out ahead. Maybe Incredibles 2 would have come out ahead. We don't know that. We just did not. The algorithm used, namely just plurality voting first past the post, when you just choose one option and that's it. And then you tally the number of votes that everybody got. That algorithm, which is a mathematical process, is not sufficiently robust. It does not collect enough information from the voter in order to make an optimized choice that represents the will of the people, right? In some sense. And the funny part of that story is that my daughter actually went up to the teacher after the teacher declared Bold to be the winner and said, well, maybe we should do something else because there are more people who didn't want Bold. And she tried to explain this to the teacher. This is my daughter's story, right?
Nice.
And the teacher got mad and sent her back to her seat. Now, I'm always on the side of the teacher, and I am even without still on the side of the teacher, knowing my daughter. I'm sure this conversation didn't quite take place in as nice a way as my daughter would like me have me believe. But it was a missed opportunity, right? A fourth grader understands that there's something off with this election system that just took place. This was a teachable moment, like a little civics lesson, wrapped up in a little bit of math that a 4th grader could completely understand. And this is sort of the starting point for my book and for basically, again, everything that I do in this space, is that we really lack this kind of education. Political quantitative literacy there is none of it in our schools. And unless that starts happening, it's going to be hard to implement or bring about mathematically better democratic system.
Yeah, awesome.
Now, with that being implemented in schools, or in general, why do you think this is so crucial for any sort of voting, any sort of democratic process?
I think it's crucial because most of this democratic infrastructure that we have, the underlying processes that power our democracy, are fundamentally mathematical. they're always reduced to some kind of an algorithm, equation, process of counting, tallying, decision making that's quantitative in some sense. So really, mathematics underlies all these things, right? So it's not just voting. Voting is the big topic, right? But when you think about the electoral college and how that mathematically plays into the choice of our president, when you think about apportioning legislative seats at every level, like congressional, state, local, the rounding to the most optimal number of representatives that you're going to allocate. When you think about districting and the geometry of districts and gerrymandering that goes along with it, which is one of the greatest threats to our democracy these days, gerrymandering. So all these processes can be analyzed and studied using mathematics, and at the same time, mathematics can tell us which of those processes work and don't work, which need to be updated, which need to be completely replaced with something else. So there's a ton there that's mathematical, and where mathematics can help us set things up better.
Man, there's so many questions there. I don't even know where to begin, because they're among the questions I have are not only ranked choice voting for people, but then I thought about, okay, you could also have ranked choice voting for issues as well. Now I know that party issues are pretty well defined, and that's defined pretty darn far in advance. And you could even trace the pipeline for when any given issue suddenly becomes political. For example, electric vehicles. You know what I mean? Like, we know what party is for them, what party is against them, and it's a matter of identity. You know what I mean? So I guess one of my questions is, I wonder in what ways, not only in direct elections, but in other ways, ranked choice voting can be used even for informing, the temperature of the public on any given issue, or just or even issues just across the board. You know what I mean? Like, I guess my question for you would be, in terms of a participation or a participatory democracy, are there other unique applications for either ranked choice voting or any other sort of voting that you can see would be helpful to diffuse the temperature in America specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I thought about that beyond actual sort of elections of officers in public office, of which there are over 500,000 elected officials in the U.S. So it's a lot of people we elect using mostly a terrible system. But I guess I would answer sort of most generically, because I don't have a specific example in mind. But anytime there are more than two options presented somehow on which we'd like to express our preference or opinion or anything else, so it's the ranked choice voting is a reasonable system to implement. It just simply might make more sense to ask people not just what your favorite thing is, but what is your favorite thing, and what's your second favorite thing, and what's your third favorite thing, right? That definitely puts kind of a finger on the pulse of the opinions of the public in any situation that you might have. So this for legislatures deciding how they're going to allocate funds to social programs or something, right? There could be a ranked choice vote that sort of captures the will of the legislators better. If we, elect people to committees in companies or universities, etc., right? We typically have multiple options. We should be ranking those options, right? The rankings themselves are going to tell us a lot more about how the community feels about the options, about the choices, regardless of who wins. We might see that someone who we thought is not a popular option is actually getting a lot of second place votes, say, right? So they're not winning, but we recognize that there's something there, right? People actually are interested in this option, which didn't seem to be viable, right? And this option gets a message that, yes, they're viable. Maybe in the next election round, they should engage even more, right? They should look for more resources or put more resources into a certain kind of campaign or something, right? So that's just a lot more information is just better.
When we're doing the ranked choice voting, essentially it comes down to a couple of things. One, the misconceptions that people are going to have with ranked choice. It's your first choice, it's your second choice. How do we play that into effect, right? And then the next thing that you think about with that, we have our theoretical mathematics, and then our really practical implementations in the book. Theory and practicality sometimes go hand in hand. Where does this fall? Because, some people are always skeptics. Oh, they're trying this new thing, right? How do we gain that trust? How do we gain that proof?
Well, yeah, that's also a great question. There's a couple of questions here. First is how do we talk to the public about this, maybe, and how do we convince the public that this is the right thing to do? And second is how do we, on the theory side of things, feel about this as being sort of the right thing to do, right? And those are separate and related. So, experience has shown that any time that a person is willing or receptive to hear about ranked choice voting and what it does and how it works, they are on board with it, right? By and large. So it's all about education, explaining that this is, you're getting a better picture of the electorate's will. And anytime people hear that, again, for the most part, they are on board with this. Now, there's some ideological resistances that are happening, especially recently, because ranked choice is becoming more popular, and hence the opposition to it is getting more organized and more vocal. But the opposition is typically along the lines of like, why are we doing this? We've always done this other voting method. What's this new thing now? Why are you like doing this to me? It looks complicated.
Exactly.
Somebody's like, right. So I think education is the right way to approach that. And in a tiny little part, that's what I hope my book would do, because it does try to really dissect these voting systems and declare kind of the best one in a most objective, formal, mathematical, kind of detached way, right? Where detached is a good thing now, right? There's no politics, there's no opinion, there's no ideology in anything that I write. If that message can be brought to people, I think it's very successful. Now, there's this other part of the story which is academically really interesting and really cool, but we probably shouldn't bother a person in the street with it, right? And there's this discussion that we have as mathematicians, which voting system is the best? Because when we say ranked choice voting, what we really mean is ranked choice voting just means people are ranking their preferences. They circle the first person, second, third candidate, fourth, and so on. Now, there are various ways of tallying these ballots, these ranked ballots. And one of the ways is the instant runoff way of tallying ranked ballots. And that's what has become synonymous with ranked choice voting. That's sort of the most popular way of tallying ranked choice ballots. But there are other ways that you could tally or pronounce the winner out of the same set of ranked ballots. So there's, you can assign points, for example, to the ranking. So that's called a board account. You can extract pairs of candidates and compare them, how they do against each other. And if there's a candidate that wins all the head-to-head contests, that's the winner. So that's called the Condorcet method, right? And there's a slew of other methods. And here's the part that's frustrating and fantastic and exciting, is that all these methods could give you different winners, right? So this is not what you want to go into the public with. You don't want to muddy the waters, right?
Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah. Well, there was this kind of like internal bickering among experts for the last 70 years as to what method is best, or best has to be defined, obviously, in formal, axiomatic, postulates way. And this is the genesis of social choice theory. It goes back to the 1950s, and it's still a very active and lively area of research. But what we seem to be kind of coagulating around the community of mathematicians, economists, statisticians, data scientists, political scientists, is that instant runoff is sort of as good as it gets. We have enough now empirical evidence from lots of ranked choice elections that have occurred over the past 20, 30 years, because lots of places in the U.S. do ranked choice, even if we're not aware of this. And other countries do it, Australia, New Zealand, Scotland, et cetera. So we have enough empirical evidence to see that instant runoff, it's not perfect, but the ways in which theoretically it could fail, or fail in the sense that it could produce kind of strange results, that happens extremely infrequently, and that we don't really have to worry about it. So
And
that
quick term. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No,
So quick term definition for those who have not read the book and may not be aware. Can you explain what instant runoff is with respect to everything else we're talking about?
Right. So instant runoff. So again, it's if you have a bunch of ballots where people have ranked their options, first, second, third, and fourth. So the way instant runoff works is if someone wins the majority of the first place votes, they're the winner. So anytime you cross the 50% threshold, you're the winner. If there isn't one, which could happen if you have 3 or more candidates, right? Maybe nobody won 50% of the first place votes. Well, then what happens is you take the candidate with the least number of first place votes, and you eliminate them. You say, okay, this can't be the winner. Just like Coco, right? Who had the least number of first place votes in my daughter's fourth grade class. So that gets eliminated. Now, anyone who had that eliminated option as their first choice, their vote gets transferred down to the second choice on their ballot, right? So that second choice now becomes their first choice. So there's a retabulation that happens here where everybody's votes for the person that's been eliminated are moved down to the next person on everybody's ballot, right? So you inherit these votes. The next person on the ballot inherits your vote. So your vote continues to contribute in some way, right? So you could vote for an option that's a third-party candidate or a minority candidate because you want to support them, even if they have no chance of winning, right? But you want to send a message that this is the person you like best, without fear, for example, that you will waste your vote. Mm-hmm. Because if they have no chance of winning in a plurality election, you will have wasted your vote on that, right? Your vote, they can't win, so but in an instant runoff election, your vote continues to contribute, right? So the person is eliminated, but your vote is transferred down to the next person in your list, which might be a now major candidate, and now you really are bringing your vote into play. So and this continues. This iterative process where continues until someone gets the majority of the first place votes. So that's sort of it in a nutshell.
Nice. Very good. The example that we used growing up, so I grew up in a house of 4 brothers. So as we're having this conversation, as I read the book, I thought about every little game theory rule, all of them that, between me and my brothers, including I call shotgun, if you're going to get into that's whoever calls it first, obviously. But one of my favorites is anytime we were serving up ice cream, one person would be in charge of serving up the bowls, then the other person got to choose which bowl they took. So
that's the cut and choose method of game theory. I was going to add, I thought you were going to say you did a lot of prisoner's dilemma in game theory, like are you going to rat on your brother? Are you going to think about ratting on each other or not?
Yes, and that's hilarious because there were times where we were a united front against my mom, and not all. So every once in a while, now I'm a parent myself. I've got 5 kids, and every once in a while, parents can make mistakes. You know what I mean? If we could clearly see, brothers, when we could all see that the parent made a mistake, like say that somebody did their best or somebody made a mess and it was an accident and they got in trouble and it wasn't their fault, we would be a united front and we would figure out ways to get, whoever out of trouble. But that was when we had the perception, the shared perception that there is an injustice. And then also, obviously, we're already brothers, and I think there's a natural kinship there, obviously. So the question, is it like when is there a kinship? When is there a shared interest? You know what I mean? Like, and that I don't know. That's all part of how we as humans form societies. So I just wanted to bring up those examples because there's just so many ways that there can be an agreed upon set of rules where there's at least an activity that can exist, even if it's a society that can exist. Because it's been tough lately. It's been tough.
But you're right. I mean, these I'm sorry just to interject a little bit, but these principles and algorithms and the way of thinking applies to the dumbest things like where we're going to go at the restaurant. Well, let's rank some restaurants, right?
Yes.
You secretly, or not so secretly, you are ranking restaurants like, let's do Indian, but let's India. Is it open? Is it closed? Do I feel like India? Well, my next choice is, Mexican. So
Yep.
you're naturally ranking your options even without realizing it comes naturally to us. So this is why I feel scaling it up to presidential elections or municipal any kind of elections, right?
Mm-hmm.
People are used to ranking things, so I don't think that's a big deal. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I think that's great. Something else, again, pardon me for all these little peripheral angles here, but one other big issue in my own family that almost leads into huge fights when we're talking about politics is people who are very strong single issue voters, like really, like never mind anything else. And it's brought up the question for me, I'm like, well, number one, I disagree with you. And again, I shouldn't judge, there are times where maybe there should be a single issue vote. I don't know. I don't know. But I just wonder, like how can you, I don't know, what would be a way where we could have a voting system where you wouldn't even have a single issue voting? And I realize that's kind of a peripheral question, but it's still a legit question, And I don't have an answer for that.
So that probably have to do with with how politics is presented to us and what the propaganda is, what the media are emphasizing or not emphasizing. So that's probably less of a mathematical question than just kind of the state of politics questions. But yeah, I mean, you could have people voting on different issues and try to kind of aggregate the answers into a bigger picture. I'm actually doing a cool project now where the students, a couple of students, are analyzing. So Pew Research does this political topology surveys every 3 years, and they poll people on a number of issues that are kind of timeless, not issues of the day, but sort of ideological, pervasive, kind of longitudinal issues. And that's what we're trying to sort of set up this topological data analysis approach to this, where we can tweak certain issues, turn them on and off, and see how the geometry of people's opinions actually changes. And we're hoping that'll give us more insight into polarization and where coalitions might or might not form, and where really the holes are in our polarized society, where the true essential holes are, and which holes can be kind of plugged up. So that's also a peripheral comment, riffing off of your question, but yeah.
I would have never thought about that with the data and how that works with topology. Oh, that is interesting.
There's this whole field of topological data analysis that was developed in the last, say, 15 years, where you just try to regard a data set as a topological space, and then you study it using topological techniques, these invariants like homotopy groups, homology groups, and then you try, and they tell you things like, oh, this thing has a three-dimensional hole. Okay, well, then you go back to the data and say, what does that mean in terms of the data, that there's this hole, the geometry is informing sort of relations in the data that classical statistical analysis can't quite do, and it's been really a fruitful area of research. So that's off on the tangent, but as you can see, I'm excited about it.
Oh, we got some awesome tangents. We could even rank our tangents for the best tangents of all time. Sometimes that's where the best dialogues come from. No, I'm serious. Like, you can prepare all you want, but sometimes it's the tangential stuff. No, are you a fan of the Reddit page? Data is beautiful.
No, I'm not aware of that. No.
Okay, so people who are obsessed with Excel and spreadsheets and representing data, they will do any kind of data that you can think of, whether it's how you fit socks optimally into a suitcase, or like just they'll like people watch at their campus and just any sort of random nerdy data, and they will present the data in all kinds of gorgeous ways with sequence and patterns and show you how you do things, and it's cool. It's just really, really cool. So
that's got to be cool, and probably there's cool visualizations, right? Because that's all the rage now, like visualizations of data. I'll have to check it out. That's very cool.
Oh, totally.
I would highly recommend it, because when you're looking for an undergraduate niche project or any weird topic, you can find it there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
just
fantastic.
the assorted. In fact, there's got to be a self-aware meta thread in data is beautiful. In fact, let's go there right now, just for the heck of it, just to see what's on. No, it's worth it. It's fun.
It's actually perfect. If you look at the second thing that's there, it's about Champions League finals, okay? Which is what I was talking about. It's happening at 3 p.m.
Yes.
And
Okay.
that's a current topic, right? Well, I'm glad you showed me this. Perfect.
Nice. Okay. I kind of like that because also that's where some of the coolest insights happen is when you just got a large population all obsessing over data and they all look at it different ways and sort it different ways.
Right.
That's when little, anomalies emerge and you've got really cool insights. So maybe part of democracy as well is just having a huge distributed population that are obsessed with data, and that's some power as well,
And actually, there's more and more emerging of the social science and data science field. This is like one of the hottest interdisciplinary areas where a lot of this, especially gerrymandering work, is happening, and it's really exciting, really cool stuff.
Nice, very cool. And again, one of the things that we've talked about doing with the Breaking Math podcast is because there's so many peripheral topics, but you can jump from one topic to another because they complement each other, and like one topic can inform rules, and in a different topic, it's fun. You just talked about data science. And you talked about political science or collecting data. One other topic that we often talk about is machine learning. I can think of adversarial reasons why you'd want to, or why one might implement machine learning. But I was curious if you have any applications for either voting or democracy or data science that are unique in machine learning that you'd like to talk about.
There are all these gerrymandering groups who do this Markov chain ensembles where they generate millions of maps and with certain properties, and they compare the given map, the map in question, to that. And this has been an amazing success of data science as it intersects with probability theory and geometry, etc. And now you see mathematicians, testifying in courts, writing amicus briefs for all these gerrymandering cases. So that is a place where really, I point to always to see how successful you can be when you combine data science, mathematical expertise, and you come out of your, ivory tower office and you engage with the world a little bit and you talk to like political scientists and lawyers and, litigators and legislators, etc. Lots of good stuff can happen there.
Now, how does gerrymandering actually undermine some of our democratic principles? We're taking the geometry of the area, the population of the area. Talk about how that's kind of manipulated for data.
Right. So the basic purpose of gerrymandering is to create districts that are preordained in some way, where one party or the other is guaranteed to win. Right. So by splitting the population or carefully carving out the population in certain ways, you can guarantee that your candidate will win in a certain number of districts, which makes the districts uncompetitive. Right. You know that your candidate is going to win there, which means that all the people living there of the other party feel completely disenfranchised. They feel like their vote doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter. So about 90% of our congressional districts are not competitive at all. They protect the incumbent, first of all, right? So the incumbent has no incentive to move their politics around at all. They pander to the base who's going to show up and vote in the district, which again, if they show up and vote, that's it. This person wins because of gerrymandering. So you have this cushy 30, 40-year-old job. The only thing cushier than it is like tenure at a university.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's really hard to kick people out.
Yep. You need to retire.
Right. Exactly. It's the only way. It's the only way you get new, politicians and new representatives in our legislatures if someone retires. Again, because there's other factors like an incumbent has more resources, name recognition, etc., media coverage, and all that. But gerrymandering is one of the main reasons why incumbents are protected. So millions and millions of people, because districts have been gerrymandered into kind of like preordained results, feel like they're completely disenfranchised, that they do not have any say in the political process, and this is completely true. So this is why this has been identified as one of the biggest threats to democracy. So there's kind of a list of things that we're doing mathematically wrong, like, ranked choice voting we should be using, primaries. The political primaries are a mathematical dumpster fire of,
Absolutely.
unrepresentative democratic processes, and then gerrymandering, districting, electoral college, all of these things. Math says you're doing it poorly, you need to do it differently.
That's one of those things where once we identify the problem, where my brain goes is, okay, the problem is well known. The problem is identified. What efforts are being made to correct it? And how optimistic can we be that we will be able to correct it? Because I know that people who benefit from that system are going to hang on to it very, very tightly. And I realize, again, we're leaping from math topic to other topic, but I still have to ask because, I'm addressing the optimism and the pessimism within myself.
Absolutely. The politicians themselves have no incentive of changing any of the infrastructures that elected them, right? So we should not hope that, even though some of the politicians declare themselves in favor of, say, like, ranked choice voting or stopping gerrymandering, etc. But there's really no true incentive coming from the top for any of these reforms. So really the hope is in local action. And there is a lot of that. I'm really vocal about this. So ranked choice voting is on there are efforts in every state to implement it. There are something like 90 municipalities that are going to have it on the ballot this November, I think, whether to incorporate it or not. My son, who's a junior in high school, and a group of his friends are trying to bring ranked choice voting to the town that we live in here in Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
And 17-year-olds who got fired up about this, right? And they're like, they're knocking on doors of the town hall. And the first time they walked in there and talked to the town clerk, I think it was, they were trying to get informed about how to bring something to the vote of the select board of the town, and what the process was. And the person there was like, "Oh yeah, what do you guys want to do?" And they're like, "Well, we'd like to do ranked choice voting." And she said, "Oh, I don't like it. You get to vote twice." Right? So this is like classic not understanding what the process is. And if she just took 2 minutes or was able, these kids could have explained to her in 2 minutes that this is not really, you're not voting twice. You're just ranking the candidate, right? And your vote kind of contributes to the process in an iterative process. She would have been probably converted to ranked choice voting, right? So this kind of local, individually explaining what ranked choice does, I think has a chance. And it's, it's happening, it's spreading. There's the organizations who really advocate for ranked choice voting say that this is the largest nonpartisan electoral reform happening right now in the U.S., and I sort of believe it. Yeah.
Nice, interesting. Man, my mind is still stuck on what we said earlier about data is beautiful and about like empowering individuals. And I keep thinking about people that seem like they're in a hopeless situation, yes. How much data could be collected, like just if, by a bunch of people, and how that might show up changing some of these, what we think of right now as harder problems. And I'm sorry, I know that may seem tangential, but like, I find that sometimes I have thinking happening like in the back of my head and then it blossoms into something, you know what I mean? So I'm going to come back to that issue later on,
But can I just riff of one word that you said?
Yes.
Empowerment. Empowerment is a keyword. Mm-hmm. Because once a person understands the algorithm, the mathematics behind any of these things, once they have understood really how electoral college is detrimental to like the one person, one vote tenet, or how it skews the powers of voters in different states. Once they understand that from a basic mathematical point of view, they are not just converted, but empowered to speak about these things to their friends, colleagues, families in an educated and informed way. I think this is also, it's the power of mathematics, right? It empowers people, understanding things, breaking down these walls, these barriers that we built around ourselves because of math trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
When these walls get torn down for people, they do feel empowered.
Mm. Very good, very good. I might also ask as well, since you've been in the United States, I know that we've had problems since before I was born. I don't think in our nation's history we've never not had problems. And this may be a bit of a pessimistic question. How have you noticed things change both for the better and for the worst in your own time since being in the United States?
Well, there are overall, I feel like a certain groups that have felt discriminated against or less powerful than others have how to say this. Uh, I think we are overall more tolerant. I think as a society, it may not seem like this, but I think the long view, the bird's eye view, that we are better at acknowledging our differences. Right now, I say that at the time of the greatest political polarization, right? But I feel that's political, uh, and cultural. As an immigrant, I feel like things have gotten maybe a little better for immigrants. maybe I have a skewed view from like Massachusetts, right?
I
But
think we do. We are blessed being in Massachusetts in comparison to other parts of the country.
Right, it could be, but there overall, I don't know, an LGBTQ person can find a place in this country. I hope, I'd like to think, in an easier way than they could have 30 years ago or something. Right? This is the kind of overall direction of more tolerance that I think we're moving in. So again, maybe not in the entire country, but there are places in the country where that's happening. Of course, all the bad stuff is still rampant, and flares up every once in a while. We're not over our political, ideological, and cultural divisions. But I feel like there was a good trend, maybe up until 7 or 8 years ago. In fact, when with the elections of 2016, that was the first time that I felt like an immigrant on that 11 p.m. on the day of the election. I was suddenly aware, in a new way, of my name, my weird name, my little accent on the letter C at the end, of my accent when I speak, even of the fact that my passport, which is a U.S. passport, I'm a U.S. citizen, but it says place of birth Bosnia and Herzegovina. Even that kind of had some sort of a new meaning, carried a different weight for me. So this is the bad part, right? I felt like things were going fairly well up until 7 or 8 years ago, and there's a lot of backsliding happening now. So it's not a satisfactory answer, but
yeah, and I think in fairness, my answer was such a wide sweeping answer. Like, how do you even answer that?
Right.
But still, I just ask for perspective.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Of course. So.
I completely understand that and can see that firsthand with the shift in cultural societies.
Right.
My dad's an immigrant as well. So
I see that.
The name is just as actually longer and much more complicated.
Right.
Even though I have a much more Americanized name. So with that, like
right.
just a topic shift a little bit. If we're going to processes within like our legislative system, think about apportionment, right? So how are we looking at like legislative seats? How is this like historically all the way to like now current day? How is this shifting? Looking at that over the past, I don't know, 250 years.
So there's really an interesting story behind this. So there are two things I could say to that. One is the House of Representatives. So the congressional legislative, the federal legislative system, right? So our House has 435 seats, and typically you don't stop and ask why 435, where did that come from? It turns out that has a real interesting story. And 435 is a terrible number that it should be, our house should be about 700 representatives large. Now, this is not a popular opinion, right? You don't go out in the street and say, I want to increase the number of politicians in Washington. And so the person in the street is not going to like that. But it turns out our house is too small, right? Each representative represents about 760,000 people. That's impossible to effectively have a constituency that's that large. You cannot have your finger on the pulse of the people you're supposedly representing when there are so many of them. So this is one issue that the founders identified 250 years ago. Madison, in particular, was very outspoken on this, and he said, "You know what? Each representative should represent about 30 to 50,000 people." So 30 to 50,000. Remember 760,000 that I just said, right?
Yeah.
So 50,000 is unfeasible now, but something less than 760,000 should happen. So House was frozen at 435 in the 1920s because of the politics of the time, because of anti-immigrant and racist policies of the time. I don't want to get into that. That's sort of a sidebar.
Yep.
And I talk about that in my book. But it's an artifact of that moment that happened 100 years ago. It makes no sense right now that we are still at 435. Okay, so that's one mathematical issue. The other one is, how do you apportion these 435 seats to the states after every decennial census? And there's a formula that does that. And that formula has an interesting story. It's been disputed and changed a dozen times over the course of our history, and it's not the best possible formula. The formula that we use now actually favors small states. It tends to award small states more representative. And there's a better formula that we should be using that's a little more optimal in that way. It doesn't favor large versus small states. It tries to kind of be as objective as possible. So there's a really interesting math story behind all that as well. So yeah, you wouldn't think there's any math. You're thinking about representatives, House of Representatives.
There's always math.
But there's always math. There's always math. Right. So I'm telling the story about our Congress, right? But all of this maps onto state legislatures as well, right? States have districts, they allocate representatives, etc. So everything that I've said applies to the state level allocation.
Okay.
Nice. So, of course, there's a lot you brought up there, and the question I'm not going to go into right now would be, of course, what can we do to improve it? Because that is always an ongoing question. But obviously, being aware of it is very important as a start. So perhaps a legal podcast, maybe Breaking Law. Oh, that'd be a good podcast name.
Breaking Law. Come on, that's gotta exist already.
Someone out there should start the Breaking Law, derivative of breaking math. But okay.
Oh yeah.
They can go into that. Yeah, about how to actually change it or how to fix it. Okay.
We know that the book focuses on a lot of the mathematical theories, but we also want to look at practical implications of implementing that. So what are some of the legal and constitutional hurdles that we're going to come up against with our voting system?
Right. So I've tried to paint that picture as well, although I'm certainly not an expert in it. But it felt like the book would be complete if I just presented the math without addressing the real life issues with their implementation. So it depends on which issue we were talking about. So, for example, with
any
voting,
of them.
any of them. So, for example, voting and elections are completely left up to the purview of the states, right? So a state decides completely how they're going to run elections. So that's a state level decision. So each state could do their own thing. Whereas, for example, if you talk about the Electoral College, that's something that's... Oh, and by the way, there's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about voting, right? Again, states are in charge, and there's no guarantee in the Constitution that people will vote and that it's up to people to elect anything, right? In fact, when we vote for president, we're not voting for president. We are voting to advise our electors from our state on how they might, should they choose to, vote for the president. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that gives the right to vote to us as citizens. That's completely left to the states, and in the case of the presidential elections, it leaves it up to the Electoral College. If we are talking about the Electoral College, that is in the Constitution, so that would require an amendment to say eliminate, and that would be pretty much impossible to do because you need 3/4 of the states to ratify an amendment, and that would never happen because the Electoral College gives smaller states some agency and power that they would be loath to relinquish. There are others. So, for example, one of the problems with our democracy is that we have these single-member districts. So each district elects one representative, either to the state legislature or the House of Representatives. Most other democracies in the world have multi-member districts. So a district elects more than one person, typically 3, 5, or something like that. Now, there's a federal law that says all districts, congressional districts, have to be single-member districts because of some bad things that had happened in the past. Again, bad math. We could fix all that with good math. And that would require, if we wanted to eliminate single-member districts from federal elections, we would have to, repeal that law. So that would be an act of Congress that could happen there, right? So there are various levels of hurdles here, right? State level, Congress level, and sort of constitutional level hurdle, depending on what issue you're talking about. So it's just like this giant mess, basically.
Now, if we're just diving in, thinking about like larger scale, people that want to make change, people that want to have advocacy for making change. When you're thinking about implementing this in our education system, how do we start that? What are the good resources that we can pull out of here? Or where would we find additional resources beyond the book?
So it's almost like I planted this question because I get to advertise my own work with that. So a couple of colleagues of mine and I run what's called the Institute for Math and Democracy.
Yep.
And we do lots of research and education work and outreach. And the education work in particular, there's a page on our webpage that gathers all kinds of resources and materials for teaching this stuff, the math and politics stuff, at various levels. There are materials for middle school teachers, high school teachers, and college faculty as well. And there are materials. So this is actually important. One of the hurdles with teaching mathematics that's kind of democracy minded is that a lot of teachers in schools are constrained by their state or school district requirements for what they have to cover. And, a lot of the teachers feel like their hands are tied and that they don't really have any wiggle room in the curriculum, et cetera. So that's a real problem. And then you have to map everything that they do. They have to map to these Common Core standards or some kind of state requirements for achieving certain outcomes, et cetera. So what we also do, because we have lots of little sort of modules of units that can be plugged into existing curriculum. So you don't have to teach an entire class of math and politics, right? Very few people have the room to do this. I'm lucky. I teach one of those classes, and I'm so lucky that my place where I work is letting me do that, and my colleagues in the math department are happy for me to do it. But I realize that's not everybody's setup. So there are these modular ways that you can try to plug stuff into education. What I think is really crucial is that we start doing this in an interdisciplinary way, right? Obviously, someone teaching, U.S. government in high school and mathematics, right? This is something that straddles these two areas. So it would be wonderful in some ideal world with this kind of joint effort to sort of introduce these topics in both classes, right? Like my son's taking AP US history, they're talking about electoral college, but they're not talking about the math of the electoral college. They're not analyzing how it plays out against the popular vote mathematically, right? So that's something that a math teacher might somehow bring a perspective on. But so there's lots of opportunity for collaboration, interdisciplinarity, and we have a lot of resources on this Institute for Math and Democracy website, and lots of books also at this point that can be used as textbooks. I'm hoping my book will become a resource for teachers as well. So yeah, any of the listeners who want to learn more about this should Google Institute for Math and Democracy. They'll find my name and my email attached to it as well. They should write to me. I'm always happy when I get emails from people who want to get engaged in this sort of education direction.
I did want to ask you real quick. So during this podcast, of course, we talked about your book, Making Democracy Count, and there's a ton of stuff in this book. But as a math enthusiast in general, I had a couple of questions about what are you most passionate about in mathematics, and what other general topics that might broach not only mathematics but other areas in general. What are your favorite things to learn about and teach about?
Well, certainly this has been the main feature of my teaching and research last few years. But I do love my topology. I'm a topologist, and I do this, algebraic topology. And I've written papers and books on the topic, so I haven't abandoned that. It's just a little bit of a hiatus. But that's really my sort of kind of research passion, and I have been able to bridge this gap between math and politics research and topology research. I'm kind of getting the best of all worlds. So I'm very excited with the place I'm in. It's like, you might call it like a midlife professional crisis, right? That I sort of switched 7-8 years ago to doing something else. But I just kind of, I was being called to this, and it's been really a fantastic ride. So there is a bunch of stuff that I would like to learn that has to do with data science, where I feel like I could contribute even more in this direction of math and politics. So, I mentioned like Python. I just know that word exists, but I don't know anything else. I'd like to learn some coding and just general sort of statistics. I have no statistics skills, so I'm really excited about learning that. And I'm also on the other. Sorry, now you're going to be going. I would love to learn a little more. I'd love to learn more political science. I'm also realizing that I don't know any. Everything I know I put in this book, and I hope it's correct. People have checked it, but I don't. Typically, to explain a concept at a certain level, you really have to understand it at a much higher level, right? So I feel like I'm okay with that on the math part of the book. But political science and like the issues of the judicial system and all that, everything I know is basically in there. So I'd like to learn more to be able to kind of understand it, internalize it at sort of a next level. I feel like I could be more. There could be more collaborations with people who come from those worlds. I was just talking to someone who teaches at the Harvard Law School yesterday, and we found all this common ground that we could cover. But I wish I knew more about that side of things. Like I could contribute a lot more. So yeah, political science, issues of power, collaboration, game theory. I would like to learn more about. Sorry, you've been trying to say.
There's no need to apologize.
So the things that you want to learn are some of my favorite topics.
Great, cool.
Awesome. Yeah, no, this whole episode has been phenomenal. Everything you said, I'm hoping that this podcast can inspire other more qualified people that than us to have conversations with you and with others about democracy and data science and politics. So hopefully there'll be a follow-up with some others. So
I hope so too, and I would add to the fact that there is math and democracy. I mean, this is like the first thing people are like, what, math and democracy? Why are you putting those two words together? Right? They don't belong together, but they belong together in a really cool way that can be relevant. It's obviously timely, right? It can be a way for us to get past the emotion and politics and partisanship. We can retreat to the formalism and again detachment. This word comes up. I like to say detachment. It's not, typically it's not good to be detached, but in this case, I think we should be. And math is providing us the framework in which to talk dispassionately and apolitically and in a nonpartisan way about some of these basic tenets, basic processes of democracy.
Awesome.
If there is one big thing that you want anybody to take away from this today, from the conversation about your book in general, what is it?
You educate yourselves about the mathematical quantitative underpinnings of democracy. There's a lot there, and to be an effective citizen, effective participant in democracy, I feel it's imperative that you know how the quantitative aspects of this work.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Excellent. Awesome. And then if anyone has questions, what is your social media handles?
I thought you were going to say, what is your social security number?
No. Sorry. No, just kidding. No, social media
Where
handles.
can we find you online or?
I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and if you just put in Ismar Volic,
Cool.
I come up. So
Awesome.
Actually, Google says I'm the only person on the planet with this name, so kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, you and me both. Actually, I've yet to meet another Gabriel Hesch. Actually, and I've looked. So
really?
Interesting.
Yeah, cool.
Indeed.
I found out there is somebody with the same name as me. She's probably 3 years older and also has higher education degrees, lives within probably 30 minutes of me.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Yep. So that's
maybe there's a plot. There's a plot of some like
plot twist.
Breaking
plot twist.
Breaking plot twist. Wow.
Yep. So I am not the only one.
Cool. Fair enough.
So in any case, I would like to thank you for coming on the show today. And it was a pleasure having you.